Welcome back to part two. Me joined by Julian McGowan. Part one was fantastic. Part two, let's hope it's a bit better. Tell me your top five British fighters since turn of century. Since turn of century.
Oh, that's a big question.
22 year.
Big question. God, I'm struggling. I mean, you'd have to have, I wouldn't say it was number one. We'd have to have Ricky Hatton up there, wouldn't we?
I don't know about that, mate.
Might be borderline number five. I'm trying to put the dates back in my head because I'm showing my age now. I mean, Calzaghe, Froch, gimmies, the kind of gimmies out there.
Lennox.
Yeah, Lennox.
Amir Khan.
I'm thinking Lennox, yeah, it was kind of, we saw him, Lennox was active in both, obviously, before 2000 and after 2000. Yeah. Amir Khan, yeah. Some good fighters, and that's why I'm not brilliant with dates, because Lennox was probably the best. I mean, just brilliant fighter. I thought Lennox, Calzaghe, Froch. I don't know Amir Khan and Ricky Hatton. I don't know how I'd put those together. I might have Ricky Hatton above Amir Khan. That might be a little bit controversial.
What about Josh Taylor, Tyson Fury?
Josh Taylor, Tyson Fury. I think I like to judge fighters based on once the career's finished a little bit more. It gives me more of a perspective. Yeah. If Tyson, let's say Tyson Fury fights 5 more years, unifies, has another 8-9 defenses and absolutely cleans up, that would elevate his standing. You know, it's Josh Taylor, unified world champion, absolutely fantastic, tainted because of his last performance. But ultimately, let's see where Josh Taylor's career finishes before I can truly give him a ranking. But what we can say is, of all those fighters that we've named, this might be a controversial one because the term great gets thrown around us way too much, doesn't it? But if you talk to the historians of boxing, everybody will say that Lennox Lewis was one of the greatest heavyweight champions who's ever lived. He might not be in number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but you rank him as a great. Now, is Joe Calzaghe an all-time great, or is he a British great? And that's a slightly different thing, isn't it? I don't think Carl Froch again is an all-time great, but he's a British great. But, you know, I mean, and it's a difficult one because it's super middleweight. All-time greats are a different kettle of fish for me. And I think Lennox is the only one of that group who I'd say is an all-time great fighter.
Okay. What next for Sam Eggington? He's got clean sweep, hasn't he? British, Commonwealth, European, IBO, still going strong. He's only 28. Is he an old 28?
I worry about Sam Eggington. He's an absolute value for money. He's like Cheeseman, isn't he? Ted Cheeseman. His value for money is every time he wins a belt, which is amazing accomplishment.
He's got half his face hanging off, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's just that savage 12 rounds every single time. And I mean, he was old when he was 24, was Sam Eggington, wasn't he? Oh. And the problem we've got with Sam Eggington, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, is when he's in the right fight at the right level, could be British, European, it seems to do okay. But can you imagine Sam Eggington in with an elite fighter at world level? It'd be savage, wouldn't it? It'd be absolutely savage. Yeah, can you imagine Charlo and Sam Eggington? And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But I worry about him, but I hope he's earning loads of cash for the fights that he's having.
Who's your fighter of the year? Last 12 month fighter of the year?
Fighter of the year. Well, on a world stage or on a British stage?
No, just on any stage. British, yeah. Fighter of the year.
British fight of the year.
I've gone for Maxi Hughes anyway.
Max, I know Maxi. Maxi used to come to my gym sparring. He's a lovely kid. He's definitely had a brilliant year, hasn't he? I mean,
top of his game, isn't he?
he's an overachiever. He's learned it. He didn't have much amateur pedigree. We used to go over to Rotherham when he at Jamie Kennedy's gym and spar over there. And there was Sykes used to hate sparring him because he was so bloody clever. He didn't waste, he didn't waste anything. He was good inside as well. He was good in the pocket. I'd still say the fight of the last 12, 18 months, in spite of the poor performance, I'd still say Josh Taylor's the fighter of the year. I think his one bad performance doesn't make a bad fighter, and he's unified. And if you look at the fighters who Josh Taylor beat, I know this is over a couple of years window, but like Prograis, Ramirez, those guys, if you put their records together, they were top fighters with top records. So I still have to say that Josh Taylor's probably the best fighter the last 12, 18 months in terms of accomplishments. Tyson Fury doesn't fight enough, but he's had 2 fights in the last year, and they've been where we had one great fight, didn't we? Taylor, Fury. On a world level, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you would have said Canelo, and then obviously got turned over, didn't he? He got beat by Bivol, so that's kind of shakes things up a little bit there. Shakur Stevenson's had a really good 12 months as well. I still want to see him in that mainstream fight, Stevenson. But,
I do.
Yeah, I think that guy can fight. He's got some great tools, but we need to see that real hot opposition for him, don't we?
Anthony Yard beat your beef. What do you think to that being made for October?
I mean, it's a savage fight. I think Yard gets beat, but I think he has moments of success in that fight. And it's probably one of them. I think he'd just get worn down. He couldn't stand in front. He's a beast himself, but he couldn't stand in front of BTB. George again, Russell. He couldn't stand in front of him. I think he gets stopped. Little George, mate. I think he gets stopped in about between 7 and 9. But it'd be a cracking fight. And I like the fight because if you are going to fight for a world title, fight the best. Don't pick up some kind of...
Like Crawford Ashley when he fought Michael Nunn.
Well, Crawford Ashley was a perfect example of that. He fought Virgil Hill, and Virgil Hill had a really long reign of defences at light heavyweight, Olympic silver medalist. Virgil Hill was a brilliant fighter. And then he fought Michael Nunn. Still don't know how he got down to 12 stone for that fight and who convinced him to do it. But exactly the same. You know, Tony Simpson fought Marvin Hagler, fought Frank Tate. Colin Jones, look at who those guys fought. Milt McCrory, Don Curry. And Luke Campbell fought some good fighters, didn't he? For, you know, Linares and Lomachenko. I just think there's more nobility. And listen, personally, I'd want to say I fought the best and come up a little bit short. Then say I won a WBA regular belt by beating, who was that guy who Dubois just beat the other week? His name escapes me because it's forgettable. The Mitchell one, yeah.
Trevor Bryant.
Trevor Bryant. Wow, yeah. But that's just me. And they'll say it's all about money, it's all about the belt. And Julian McGowan, you can't take it away from him that he was a world champion, but are you
okay. Really? Well, I've got Beat to beat Yard, but I hope Yard does well. I hope he's all right.
I do as well.
He's a brave kid, but he's been through a lot on it. I still think it's too early to be putting him in with guys like that. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they're doing. Beat Lyndon Arthur, that's it. So he shouldn't be in with him. He get hurt. Right. Ben Shalom against Bricktop. They seem to be going at it, don't they?
He's the new kid on the block again. It's a bit like Eddie Hearn. It's a
bit like Frank and Mickey Duff, isn't it?
It's just the same again, isn't it? History repeats itself. And
they're getting younger. They're getting younger, though, aren't they? Frank's getting older, and he's still putting him in the place, isn't he?
Ben Shalom still looks like he needs his parents' permission to go out. You know what I mean? He's such a young kid, isn't he? I don't know enough about him. I think his intention's good. I think he needs to. Some of the stuff though, he started talking ridiculous. Because I did have one little beam about it actually, Russell. Just a quick one. Try not to revert back, but I can't help it. So I read something online that Richard Riakporhe talking about him fighting for a world title, and Ben Shalom says, you know, he's been talking to Richard Riakporhe, and he says he feels that he's gone through every level now. And I just thought, this is where we are now in 2022. So Richard Riakporhe boxed at domestic level, McCarthy and Billum Smith. Had a couple of years out for whatever reason. He's come back and he's beat a couple of guys who aren't that great. Is that what we're talking about? Every level? Is that so? This was Ben Shalom. He's boxed at every level. He wants a world title fight now, and it took me back to Tony Simpson. So can't help myself. When Tony Simpson fought for the Marvin Hagler for the world title, Tony Simpson was 47, 3-1. He'd been British champion. He'd fought Frankie Lucas, Finnegan, those real hot fighters at the time. Legend was Finnegan. He then fought for the Commonwealth title. He then won the European title. He then, to break into the top 6 or 7, he knocked out Alan Minter, former undisputed middleweight champion of the world, in 3 rounds. And then he fought Dwight Davison, who was 32-1, who was a red hot contender. And Tony Simpson beat him in a final eliminator. Now, Ben Shalom and Richard Riakporhe, I want to sit you both down and I want to have a little conversation with you about when you say shit like, I feel I've gone through every level. You haven't gone through any level. You've had a couple of domestic level fights. And that's what I feel is wrong with. Why am I saying all this? Because the danger is you're skimming belts. You won the British, you won a WBA Intercontinental Toys R Us belt, and you're skimming belts. You're avoiding fighters. But then eventually you're going to put yourself into a situation where you fight for a world title. And you're not going to be ready. You're not going to be ready. So yeah, it's just a little bugbear that I've got when people say I've gone through the levels, and people just don't go through the levels now, Russell, do they? They just don't. People just do not go through the levels anymore. Conor Ben's not gone through the levels, has he?
Oh yeah, no. And I dread to think what will happen if you got in with somebody like Errol Spence or Terence Crawford. It'd be mind-numbing money what could happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And then you get absolutely crushed and exposed, don't you? But I just think everybody's looking to make quick cash now, aren't they? You know, the YouTubers, the promoters.
Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
I know, give me some of that. Honestly, it's just, it makes me sad, but I guess it's where we're at right now. You know, even Max, bless him, our Max has jumped on the bandwagon and he's been offered a few quid for a few fights. You can't blame the fighters. It's what they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. And I think there's an element of that with boxing now. It's a bit like life, actually, isn't it? Everybody wants a fast track, don't they? Nobody wants to pay the dues, learn the craft, and become an accomplished fighter before. They just want the belts, they want the cash, they want the Instagram hits and the sponsorship without learning the craft truly.
Well, I'd have thought Max has gone about it all wrong, because after one fight, didn't he go to a DAZN show in Nottingham? After one fight. And when I'm not saying this has happened to Max because he's our pal, but
yeah,
when you go into these shows and people know who you are because of social media, high-fiving you, it's easy to get carried away with that kind of thing and talk knackers till 4 a.m. And really, you should be in bed for 12 if you're going out like that late on a Saturday night. Do you know what I mean? So I hope that he doesn't take his eye off the ball, because he needs to get some weight off, doesn't he? Max.
Commitment, everything.
He's got a chance. He's got a bit of a chance of maybe getting to a journeyman level if he gets some weight off.
Make a few quid and box on the big bills. Box
But
at the
what will happen if he rushes himself and don't learn and don't train? He'll get wiped out by somebody that's terrible, and then they'll not want to risk him. There'll be all sorts of, because there'll be people wanting to block Max's license. You know, this is what happens.
Oh, absolutely. You have to respect the craft, don't you? And that's ultimately. You can't be stepping up to certain levels if you can't do certain things in the ring. And the craft of boxing is something that takes years and years and years and years to learn. And you can't, there's no fast track in boxing. They try to fast track everything, but you get exposed. I know we talk about this all the time, and he's made hundreds of millions, but Anthony Joshua, he was another one. He had a shortish amateur career, won a gold medal, of course. But we've seen now, haven't we? Whenever he's faced anybody who's got true ring craft, we're seeing those deficiencies in his game. They're glaringly obvious. But he would argue, I've got two world titles, gold medal, and I've earned a shitload of cash. What do you know?
What do you think to him coming out a couple of days ago and saying that he sacked his training team because they didn't tell him that he was losing the fight when he got to championship rounds? What do you think to that?
I mean, there's a guy, it's his voice of a guy. First of all, he's looking for reasons why he lost. He's trying to convince himself I lost because of that, and him. But ultimately, this is what I always talk about is a boxing IQ. So if you think of Tyson Fury has got an immense boxing IQ. He doesn't need his coaching team to tell him to, to hook off a jab or to pivot or to move bi-directionally or to do. He does those things instinctively because he knows his craft. Now, if Anthony Joshua, I mean, when he was saying in the Ruiz defeat, what punch do I throw? What do I do next and next? It was like coaching in the corner.
Well, what it were, Anthony Joshua had never been in a firefight, a proper firefight. He'd been in that little one with Vladimir, who were an old man and had no time. Yeah. Ruiz were up for it, wasn't he?
I remember the Ruiz fight, and I think it was the second round. So it was before Joshua dropped him. And there was a moment, you look out for these little clues. And there was a moment where Ruiz he slipped a couple of AJ jabs and then he parried them. And he was sidestepping and he was stepping across Joshua's path. And I could see Joshua starting to breathe heavy because he'd never come across anybody who could actually slip and parry a jab. Basic things, but ringcraft things. The guys like Tim Witherspoon used to do. So Andy Ruiz, 105 amateur fights, he knew his craft. He was overweight, but he knew his craft. And you can see whenever Joshua comes up against somebody who's got any kind of IQ, he almost has like panic attacks in the ring. I mean, he starts to tighten up. He starts to breathe really heavily. And that was really hard for me to watch that. And then the Usyk fight, again, it was the same thing, wasn't it? It was like, when you can blame the coach, what do I do here? What do I do there? But guess what? If you'd trained and really lived a lifestyle, and what you should have done was travel the gyms, get as much sparring as you can, like Larry Holmes and Tim Witherspoon used to do, sparring Joe Fraser, Ken Norton, all those guys. That's why they learned their craft outside of the spotlight. And Joshua never did that. Joshua was in the spotlight from the day one gold, of course, big heavyweight. Everybody wanted to know him. And he never truly learned his craft, did he? And you just know with Joshua, and I've said this before, and people say, how do you know? It's like, because I know a fragile fighter when I see one. There are certain fighters you have to be really careful, even who you get them sparring with. And you know that every Joshua spar will have been controlled and within a comfort zone. Whereas if he'd really done what some of these guys have done, who I've just mentioned, and traveled the gyms over the years, he'd have learned his craft. Anthony Joshua doesn't need a strength conditioner. Anthony Joshua needs to learn the craft of boxing, because when you're in a fight against an Usyk, your strength conditioning means fuck all. It means absolutely nothing. What you need to know is how to get past the southpaw jab, how to slip inside that shot, how to adjust your foot and get your foot on the outside of Usyk's right foot. And then when he pivots off and steps under, you need to know how to do that two-phase double step and creep up on him again. And he's never learned that kind of stuff. And you just know everything's conditioned what he does. Everything's conditioned and controlled. And even though it was a kind of tongue-in-cheek offer, I didn't think it was a bad idea when Tyson Fury says, come and train with us, to AJ when he got beat. He would have actually learned a lot being in the camp with Fury. And Fury was switches all the time. He would have seen that demeaning to do that, by the way. But I think it was probably a half genuine offer from Tyson Fury when he said, come and train with us, I'll train you. And what he would have learned was every time he makes a mistake, he get punished by Fury. And I think it'd been such a great idea, but their egos are that big.
Oh, it's off chart.
His egos.
I don't think it'll ever happen to me, that fight now, to be honest.
No. I mean,
it's favored away than ever.
It's the one fight, isn't it, Joshua and Fury? It'd be the one massive anticipated fight where absolutely nobody would give Joshua a chance of winning it. It's not often we get fights of such a magnitude that everybody wants to see, but everybody thinks is a one-horse race.
Yeah. I think Big Meech gets took out by Usyk. clean out. That's cleaned out.
As you know, I've gone here, there, and everywhere on that one. I always thought Usyk would beat him the first time. I want to see Usyk, a little bit of training footage, and if I see that glow and if I see that little bounce in his step, again, he'll trounce AJ. But I've just had concerns about Usyk's mental state. But apparently they're just concerns, and they're not based on anything. And what I'm hearing is he's looking very good right now.
Who, AJ?
Usyk, sorry, I'm hearing Usyk's looking. Yeah, so I don't care. I genuinely don't care how AJ looks. I don't care if AJ's had a great camp. For me, it's all down to one man. If Usyk has got the right mindset and he's had the right preparation, the right conditioning with everything that's going on in his world right now, if he's 90%, doesn't matter what Joshua does, that result is going to be exactly the same.
Okay.
It's all down to Usyk's preparation, nothing else.
What do you see happening if Joshua gets beat?
It's like anything. I mean, the paymaster, the zone. I mean, what do you do with him? And I'm sure, I mean, what will he be earning for this now? 25, 30 million? It'd be on a serious crack. Yeah, so it'd be on silly money. You can't continue to pay him silly money if he gets beat for a third time and gets beat. If he gets beat conclusively, let's just say he gets stopped after 6, 7 rounds and it's another hopeless case like the Ruiz fight, suddenly that tens and tens of millions of dollars, it won't be there for him. That kind of, you can't continue to pay someone who's been proven to be a B grade heavyweight. So it depends, doesn't it? There's always a Dillian White third fight, but what are you doing there? You're trying to market two fighters who have been badly exposed at the world level, and that becomes effectively a highly embellished domestic level fight, just like the first fight was.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting as long as we get the fights that we want, and we're getting the fights. We've had the trilogies. We're getting all the rematches left, right, and centre. But we want to see some first-time fights now, don't we? We want to see Usyk and Fury. We want to see Fury.
We want to see these Olympians, don't we?
Absolutely, we want to see these young. I want Joe Joyce to get some kind of opportunity before he turns 40, and that might sound ridiculous, but it's not.
31 next month.
Yeah, it's just nuts, isn't it?
He's had one fight. Yui's 27. He's had 30, hasn't he? Something like that.
Yeah, it's
29.
Just let some of these kids have a shot. You know, let them have a shot. Let them earn a shot. And let's get some new people in the mix in heavyweight title fights, because we can't carry on watching the same. I mean, what happens, right? So if Joshua beats Usyk and it's a close fight, let's just say Joshua beats Usyk, do we have to have a third fight then? A decider?
Yeah.
And what does that do? That takes up another 12 months of the calendar, doesn't it?
Another 12 months till they can fight Fury, isn't it?
Yeah. So
then all can happen in between. Politics, injury, TV companies go bust, drug bans.
This is the problem, isn't it? Because we used to get, we had 2 belts in the 80s, and I'm there again. But the unifications, the ones that mattered, we didn't always see unifications. We never saw Larry Holmes unify because the WBA belt fighters kept getting beat. So there was no real glamour for Holmes to unify. Talking fight cuts here. But when Leonard Hearns proved to be the number 1 and number 2, they had a quick defense each, and then they made the unification, didn't they? The same year, the year after Tommy won his belt, beat Cuevas, he fought Leonard. Why are we not seeing it? Really, really quick turnaround of unification fights, and the fights we want to see, we're just not getting. So, do I want to see Joshua and Usyk too? Not really.
It was conclusive, the first fight, wasn't it?
It was massively conclusive.
So why do we need a rematch if Usyk will beat him conclusively?
It just makes no sense, does it? And it lacks a bit of drama. I mean, the only drama we've got is, is Joshua going to really put it on him? And if he does, it could be even more painful for him. I mean, Garcia, what's Garcia going to do? Is he just going to train a hop until he finds the right coach? Because Garcia's not got a history of working with heavyweights. He did a bit of work with Andy Ruiz, but you're not going to teach Andy Ruiz much. You're just going to condition him. So what's Garcia? What's he going to bring to Joshua's game? Nothing.
Not much.
And he's a good coach.
He was never had an heavyweight champion, has he?
He's never a heavyweight champion, and that's where I think I mentioned that the Furies working with Joshua. It won't happen, but they understand heavyweight boxing. Like Peter Fury understands heavyweight boxing. It's a different animal, isn't it? And I said this to Max all the time. Heavyweight, you can't train a heavyweight the same as you train a lightweight. You just can't. Everything's different. The pressure on the joints is different. The speed, the mobility of them is different. The dexterity is different. You don't get a heavyweight on the pads and have him doing 8-punch combinations. You just don't.
Unless you're Nathan Gorman.
Well, unless you're Nathan Gorman, of course, that was good to watch. And Tyson would throw the combos, but realistically, you look at the great heavyweights, and they were jab, cross, hook, and it was quite simple, but done in different sequences. So Garcia, I don't know what he's going to bring him. I just don't.
Okay. Dave Allen against Max. Max has called him out, and I've had that much stick on it over it. What do you think? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I told Max, just be careful with the call outs, Max, and he listens to me. I think I sometimes think he's tongue in cheek. I think he's just been a bit daft, but Dave Allen, there's a big gap between the two right now.
It's gone over Max, wouldn't it? Be like a ball running up.
Yeah, you got a massive chasm between the two, because you got a guy who's been in with, Olympians and even sparred not just the fighters he's boxed like Ortiz and that, but he's sparred with the Usyks of this world. Yeah, he got Paggard, but he's a different level, isn't he? He sparred Joshua before. You can't compare levels. So I said to Max, let's just not worry about anybody else. Let's just worry about you, Max, and we'll get you to some kind of place. But you can't. You just can't do it. It'd be like, you get professional fighters who have got massive. They're always in the gyms all the time. I'm not saying Alan's always in the gym, but Max started to learn to box in his 30s. These are guys who are young men who have been in the gyms for a long, long time. You can't quickly learn this thing, and you find out very quickly in the ring if you're taking shortcuts. So that's a fight that'll never happen. If Max, I don't mean to be disrespectful, Max is a lovely kid, got loads of time for him. If Max gets 2 or 3 more wins under his belt, it might be good for him to do a couple of rounds sparring with Dave Allen. Just sparring, a bit of sparring. Tells you where you're at.
Dave will turn up in his KFC sliders, won't he, and Phil Max in.
Yeah, I saw that footage of him. Yeah, he's a character, is Dave Allen, isn't he? And Max is a character as well. They're both good lads out there. They just enjoy boxing.
Can you imagine them two going at it at the presser?
I just don't understand is it Twitter or Instagram? I don't understand this world. It's a world I've withdrawn from because I never quite got it.
Me and Dennis could have our rematch, couldn't we, from Bulgaria? Dennis, you owe me a rematch.
You could be on the undercard, couldn't you, mate?
When I pinned him down like a rat, knee on his neck.
I saw Dennis on the pads.
He beat me, mate. Yeah, you see, he's all right on pads then, isn't he?
I saw he was all right with Den on the pads. I watched him and was fuming.
Fuki, yeah, I feel that.
For a guy who's of a certain age, he looked in good shape, did Dennis? He looked all right.
He's in good shape, Dennis. He's a lot heavier than me, and he's not as fit as me or good looking.
Yeah, well, we can't have everything, can we, mate?
Do you remember a fighter called Pele Reid?
Pele Reid was the ex-kickboxer who knocked out Vitaly Klitschko, wasn't he?
Kickboxing, yeah.
Yeah, he sparked him, didn't he? And then was it with the Ingalls and Julius Francis turned him over for the British?
Yeah, I just wonder what happens. Anybody know what's happened to Pele Reid? I mean, he's a good electrician. Could do electrician.
He did a socket changing.
Yeah, something like that. Julian, drug testing. I want to finish off on drug testing. What is the answer?
I don't know if it's true. So again, this is just, it's not hearsay. I read stuff and I might have read it somewhere. Somebody made this quote. But drug testing, once it's gone through the labs and everything, costs about $4,000 for the whole process. from the officials to taking the samples, to the administration side of it, to the laboratory side of it, and the publication. I think the whole process costs about £3,000 to £4,000. So first of all, drug testing on a local level, it's just way too expensive. So what do? You can't see what we're saying. First of all, is small hall shows, minor titles. We can't have drug testing because it's just not viable. Okay. What you have to do is what you should do is maybe people in the gyms talk. Anybody, I don't like people telling tales, but if someone's suspected of being a drugs cheat, that's a highly dangerous and a highly disgusting thing to do, actually.
Boxing, innit? Get punched in the head, aren't you?
So we should have some kind of a random drug
It's not
testing.
sprinting, is it?
No. If you're a professional athlete throughout the season, you should be able to be spot checked. So the ones that we suspect, and we all know who some of those fighters are, the ones we suspect of being on PEDs, those are the ones who should be randomly checked. No lawyers involved, right? I work with pros, and they could have tested Sykes anytime they wanted for performance enhancing drugs. And if they'd have turned up at the gym asking for a blood test, it wouldn't have bothered me.
Did you ever get tested? Did you ever get tested, Sykes?
What they do is for the title fights is you do a urine test basically. So anything that you had been taking, if you'd not had it in your system for a week or two, it wouldn't show up in the urine. So you get tested, it goes off to the labs, and we never heard anything back. I assume because he tested negative, it was absolutely fine. So he did get tested for the British. He didn't get tested for the English title fights. And again, it's what I'm saying. It's an expensive thing for people to have to do. How do you get around it? Do we have more random testing than we have? Do promoters take a cut of the shows and of the revenue and put that towards an independent testing body, something like that? I don't know. What I do know, and what I fundamentally believe in, and I'm not going to say one name at all. I don't do that. I've always held the view, anybody in boxing who was proven to have taken performance enhancing drugs, I would ban them for life. I think it's a despicable thing. Cheating's one thing, but putting hurt on another human being when you're knowingly on PEDs that are going to give you more strength, more endurance, more everything, I think it's disgraceful. And whilst people love Canelo Alvarez, he never appealed that decision. He was never really punished for that. I think he should have been thrown out of the sport. And anybody, I don't care who you are, who's been tested positive for performance enhancing drugs. And I'm not talking about, when I say performance enhancing drugs, by the way, I'm not mentioning names. I'm not talking about a nasal spray or something where you think, well, actually, there could have been a little bit of naivety there. This guy's taking a certain whey protein where there's a small amount of this in it and that in it. That's a bit of a grey area. I'm not talking about grey areas. I'm talking about performance enhancing drugs, Glenbuterol, steroids, Deca, all that kind of stuff. Chuck them out the sport, because that's the only way you stop it happening, is people getting life bans and massive fines. And any go on.
We said they're only going to do that when we have a body on slab, aren't they? Because somebody's been found guilty of cheating.
Well, if you look at Ben Johnson in the '88 Seoul Olympics, I mean, you only had to look at Johnson at the starting lineup from the photographs from him in '84 when Carl Lewis was beating him day in, day out, to in '88. You know, its body was like that of an Olympic powerlifter.
What about that Flojo? She was running quicker than men at one point.
Oh, she was a man, wasn't she? And then when these, sad, but when these people are having heart attacks in the 40s, you're like, oh, okay, I was one of the fittest elite athletes in the world having heart attacks in the 40s. And we know why, because we know what performance enhancing drugs do. So you look at Ben Johnson, but what happened with Ben Johnson is he was stripped of his bronze medal. He'll never get that back. And
never. Silver, he got stripped of his gold medal.
Yeah, gold. And they wipe it out, don't they? Anything that you've achieved is literally just wiped out. And I think that's what we have to be. And we have to ban people for life. I'm not talking, as I said, not the grey areas, not the naivety, not the nasal sprays. performance enhancing drugs. You know, we all know which those are. Get them out of the sport. It's filthy. It's disgusting. I've no time for them, and it just, you know, something. We all know what we put in our bodies. Yeah, the one thing taking recreational drugs or anything like that, but I was just disgusted. I was disgusted that what happened with Canelo Alvarez, and he got a 12-month ban. And then after that, he signed that massive deal, didn't he, for 360 odd million. That was his reward for cheating. The biggest deal in boxing history.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Well, listen, thanks for coming on, Julian.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure. Have a great weekend. It's 2:10 on a Saturday. So all the best. And
You take care, mate. Thanks for having me on, Russell.
No problem. You take care.
Peace
out. All right.
Thanks, mate.
Well, I enjoyed that with Julian today. Good boxing chat for you. I'll get this out now for you, and then we've got a couple of videos on both 4th of July, haven't we? All right. Don't have nightmares. Peace out.